Welcome to the War in Heaven. I am Austin Hepworth. I'm here along with Michael Hepworth, and we are your hosts as we talk about the principles of religion, principles of God, how these relate to the War in Heaven, and how they're reflected in laws or societal trends or different things that we have going on in society today. So, to follow up on previous discussions, we've been talking some about um, opposites, about creation, about how in order for one thing to exist, there has to be something that's not that thing. And so if you want to catch up and know more about these discussions, make sure you've listened to the previous episodes. But today we're going to really focus in on one of the big, I'd say, concerns that people have, or one of the big things that they throw out to say, I can't believe in God because there's so much suffering in this world. If God really loved us, people say, why is there suffering? And I certainly can understand why we ask these questions. It's painful to look at wars and to truly see the pictures and videos of what happens. The suffering is intense. It's awful what people can do to people. And as we look at that, we naturally, I think, ask the question, why doesn't God intervene? If he's all powerful, why is there suffering? And in my opinion, to really understand the answer to this, and there's probably multiple answers to this. So don't take this as the be all end all. We're not even pretending it is. But one fundamental aspect to consider in this is, what is love? And in order for love to exist, what has to also exist? Because if you're going to create love, let's say that, again, go back to my hand. If my hand is love and it is something, then there's something that's not love. And that's the only way that love can exist, if it has balance, if it has something that a form it fits inside, and then something that's not it. And so as we look at what love is, I think back to a world, my mind just kind of imagines this big, vast, empty space. I imagine it with light in it, not the black darkness that we see in our space, but just kind of, it just goes on. And let's say there's one being there, and the being looks around and says, hey, I'm lonely. Let's create a second being. And if this being can produce a second being, and now there's two beings, they're looking at each other. Say, if we go to the question then of saying, well, what's love? My definition of what love is, when we talk about love, or this love in a religious sense, I define love as being a recognition, a voluntary recognition by a person or a human, a living thing, that something else that's living is of more value than even that living being that has the feeling of love. So if I'm one of those two beings and I look at the other and go, wow, you're so amazing, I want to make you happy, and I'm willing to forego things in my life, sacrifice things, let go of things, to the point even if there was something that threatened the existence of this one being, if I laid down my life and said, I will save you because I put so much value on who you are, that feeling is incredible and it's deep. And the scriptures talk about this a little bit. This says, greater love hath no man than this, than he that layeth down his life for his friends. And that to me is implying there's this voluntary, conscious choice to love. I've made a decision that something is of so much value that it's worth me dying for. So we've talked about a love of country, a love of friends, a love of family. And I choose to give up who I am, what I am, my existence even, for another being in existence. And one of the things I believe strongly is that God loves us that way. The Christian world strongly teaches that Jesus Christ came and actually laid down his life. And so God himself said, I love you enough that I will die. Now, I'm really excited to get into discussions about what that means, why death was necessary, why Christ's suffering was necessary. And we'll hit on it a little bit today. But for the moment, Christ died because of his love. And one of the things I feel that we're searching for in life is we are searching for this deeper meaning. We're searching for some type of satisfaction or progression or something that helps us feel. Even one of the ways to say it is feel alive, but feel alive in a good way. We want to experience something. We have this deep yearning and desire that says, well, are you of value? Do you matter? And the resounding answer is yes, you do matter. You are of value. But in this world, there's so many decisions made where it doesn't feel that way. And it can become very difficult for us. But again, going back to this notion of, well, if love exists, it can feel like a very fleeting or small thing. How many times is someone willing to lay down their life for you? Probably not a lot, right? But what does love imply? If these two beings are there, they're staring at each other in this vast expanse of space, the one could say, I want to make you a slave. You're now going to do everything I want. And they could do the opposite of love. But imagine in that world if there were laws passed that said, you can't make anyone a slave. You can't make anyone just do your will, do whatever you want. You have to let them do their thing. Or meaning you can't impose that. Then love suddenly loses some meaning. Because now someone can't make the choice to use me or abuse me or do different things. And so their only choice is to do something nice. And if I take away the ability for that being to harm, I'm also taking away the ability for a being to feel love. Because if a being can't choose harm, then there's no meaning to the choice of not choosing harm. And this is something that I believe is so fundamental to understanding God and the nature of love and our existence, purpose, fulfillment, all these different things, is that it comes because it is a choice. The only way for it to be a choice is for the two choices, the two opposites to truly exist. If I'm going to choose to love, I have to choose not to hate. I have to choose not to hurt. And because I made the choice not to hate, not to hurt, not to enslave, not to do these different things, it makes the choice to love that much more valuable and meaningful. And so, in the nature of opposition, in the nature of creation, to me, the fact that there's suffering all throughout this world, people struggling, bad choices being made, people abusing their agency, to me, that's proof that love exists, actually. Because those are the conditions necessary for something such as love to truly exist. And when we talk about something amazing and deep that makes life worthwhile and worth living for, there have to be pain and suffering that's amazing and deep as well. Amazing in a bad way, that gives meaning to this. Michael, curious what your thoughts are as we start into this conversation on suffering, love, and the connection between the two.
Yeah, I just want to expound on that point you made about seeing suffering indicating the existence of love. C.S. Lewis said, pain would be no problem unless side by side with our daily experience of this painful world, we had received what we think a good assurance that ultimate reality is righteous and loving. If there was no expectation of not suffering or love, then pain isn't a problem. It's not an issue in our lives. And yet, frequently, what we hear is this isn't fair, this isn't right, this is wrong. Using those transcendent terms, looking for something higher, looking for that love that exists. The existence of suffering is the evidence of love. And that's not so. Your point to having a law means that it makes it harder for a person to love. That's not to say that in a society where we say, hey, you can't go kill other people, that doesn't mean that individuals don't love each other. But as the force behind you can't kill other people increases, your ability to love will decrease. If you get to the point where you are now chained to a wall so you can't kill somebody, you have lost a whole lot of ability to love someone else. And so there are degrees to this when we talk about the imposition of force to create safety or something along those lines. So if there's a law that says you can't enslave somebody else, and in order to enforce the law, you are then enslaved, your desire not to enslave anybody else doesn't really matter. It doesn't affect another person. They can't feel that you don't have that desire because everybody's enslaved to the law that says you cannot enslave anyone. So there has to be some sort of balance struck in a society between the order we're creating with a law versus people's ability to do good things. And that's another nuance to this, is also that showing love to somebody isn't always in a manner that creates an immediate positive outcome to the person receiving the love. An easy way to understand this is to look at the interaction between a parent and a very young child, say a year old that's learning to walk. If we take the statement, well, God doesn't exist or doesn't love us because of suffering, we take that to its full extent, then you would have to say that a parent that is teaching their child to walk and allows their child to fall down doesn't love that child. The child fell down, didn't like that very much, maybe got bruised a little bit. The point of the parent helping the child learn to walk to allow them to fall down, because that's how they're going to get stronger and that's how they're going to grow. So many times love is expressed in the allowance of suffering to one degree or another, with the understanding of the proper outcomes that come from it. So to just look up to God and say, they're suffering, therefore you can't exist, would be to deny the love that parents have for their children and allowing them to experience hardship, difficulties, in order that they can learn and grow. And I think that relationship that's easily seen between a parent and a child exists between all humans. It's harder to pinpoint between two peers, but I think that love can be expressed between two people. And it's not always, I'm going to take everything that's hurting you, take it away and on myself. Sometimes the love is an understanding what that person needs. And so love is, again, to your point, it's the putting somebody's needs above your own, to the point where if you love somebody and they need to experience some sort of pain, it's going to hurt you as well. And your love is expressed in the fact that you allow it to continue, that you allow yourself to be uncomfortable while your child is uncomfortable. It doesn't feel great to see your child suffer, but when they have to learn and grow and get stronger, you just kind of have to swallow that and say, they've got to learn. And that's another way to express love. So love is expressed by it's enabled by our ability to express it. And it's not always just shown in an alleviation of something that doesn't feel great in that moment.
Yeah, and I appreciate that. And also the clarification on when I said if we pass the law that says you can't do something, I was thinking the context of those two of kind of like a law of God that just makes it impossible to do it. But I wasn't very clear on that. Because yes, here in our world, when we pass a law, we still have the physical ability to do something. And so I was talking about if we remove the physical ability to harm, if I say, I'm going to program a human so that they can't even think a thought that might cause harm. And I'm just going to take away that ability for them to make that choice. Then I'm taking away the ability for them to feel or convey love. Because now there's no meaning to the choice of doing something nice for me. Another way I look at it, and I've used this example before, but is with a robot. There's a robot programmed and I walk in the door and the robot comes up to me, wills itself over or walks over, whatever it does, gives me a hug and says, I love you, Austin. I won't feel love from that robot. It's being told what to do. It's not making a decision about showing love. And so agency is a critical component of love. And because love can only exist where agency exists, love only has meaning if suffering exists. Or meaning I have the true choice. I can look at Michael and can say, am I going to do something mean or nice? My nice actions then have meaning because I truly had the choice to choose something different. But I exercise my choice to show kindness or love, and then that creates meaning. Because when you look at a being that could truly choose one or the other, there was no programming, just true agency. That's where meaning exists. And so as humans, when we search for meaning, we have to understand that meaning is found through suffering. Suffering is a critical component to meaning, even. And you can look at suffering in various ways. You can look at it as risk. You can look at it as loss. You can look at it as harm, pain, damage, different types of things that can come. But let's just, right now the Paris Olympics are going on. Paris Summer Games 2024. And I was looking, there was an article about track. So track and field, these guys run super fast, and they had a 18-year-old runner from a small country. And he had been working, had this Olympic dream of making it to the Olympics, of running. He's a great runner. Felt he had a chance at winning. And they line up on their starting blocks for the race. And when you run track and field, and this is something I don't think is super fair, but track and field has tons of events going on at the same time in the stadium. And as this happens, there's different sounds going off, different things taking place. So all these runners line up, and this 18-year-old, pretty sure he hears a gun go off, and he takes off. But it's a false start. He had heard a noise from somewhere else. It wasn't the official start of this race, and he's the only one that jumped. The others didn't. And in track and field, you get an immediate full disqualification for a false start at this level. You're just out if you do a false start. And it's a very harsh penalty. There's reasons for it. You can read about those. They have their justifications for it. But the news article is talking about this guy breaking down in tears, sobbing because his dream's gone, all these things. And the thing that is fascinating about the Olympics is that at the end of it, one person's given a gold medal, one person's given a silver medal, and one person's given a bronze. And we look at those people, and there's something to celebrate. There's some deep meaning or purpose in that. You look at the NFL, the Super Bowl. Not every team gets a Super Bowl championship. They don't get their ring. They don't get these different pieces that go with it. The meaning comes because there's loss and heartache along the way. And ultimately, whether it's fate, whether it's hard work, whatever it is, someone ends up making it through all the requirements and things that are in place to be at the top. And there's incredible meaning that comes. The athletes that participate, that get a gold, incredibly deep meaning with that. That deep meaning can only exist with the loss along the way. And so as heartbreaking as it is to see the suffering and the sorrow and the different things that take place of the people that lose, the people that break a leg, the people that have a false start, there's this underlying recognition, I think, still very strongly in our world but there's something to celebrate. There's a reason to continue on with the Olympics and sports and all the heartache that goes with it, because in the end, the triumph of victory is worth it. And I think it's interesting. I haven't yet heard, maybe there's push for it, but I haven't yet heard people saying that they should give a gold medal to every person that gets to the Olympics, or a Super Bowl ring to every person that plays football. If they did, there wouldn't be meaning to it. If we took away the ability to lose, we take away the ability to win. And to me, it's the very same principle. If you take away the ability to cause suffering, you take away the ability to love. The two go hand in hand. And this is the way that creation works. Winning can only exist if there's losing. Love can only exist if there's suffering, because agency has to be there fully operative. Both ends have to exist. If I take away the ability to lose and I just say, oh, I'm just going to physically remove from this world the ability to lose because it hurts people's feelings, people cry, broken dreams, let's just stop it. If there's no longer an ability to lose, there's now no ability to win. It's just the two can't exist without each other in our fallen world as it is. And so to me, these two concepts go hand in hand in looking at, and I think the Olympics are a good example of those. Michael, do you have thoughts on that?
Yeah, Dostoevsky in his short book, The Notes from the Underground, he postulated something I don't think I've heard anybody else say. He said perhaps suffering is just as good for man as is prosperity. And that's not something we like to consider. We want to think that everybody should be prosperous to the point of no suffering. Nothing's hard. We talk about people deserving things. But is the existence of the suffering, or even the chance that it could happen, what makes the prosperity actually worthwhile? In the case of the Olympics, is the chance of losing what makes winning worth it? If there was no chance of losing, then there's no reason to work hard. There's no achievement. There's no exercise of agency to try to overcome difficulty, to be faster, stronger in our lives. If there's no chance of making a mistake, then there's no getting better. There's no improving. There's no becoming. We lose meaning to our lives. Dostoevsky also said in that same book, he said that the whole meaning of human life can be summed up in one statement: that man only exists for the purpose of proving to himself every minute that he is a man and not an organ stop. He talked about how if you lose free will, if you lose the power of choice, you're nothing but an organ stop that can be pushed and pulled at the whim of somebody else. And we seem to, as human beings, want to prove that we have agency, we have will to choose, even when it's in small and simple things. We like to make our own choices. We're out to prove to ourselves that we're human and we're not an organ stop. And so to kind of take that and apply it back to politics and the law and society, this isn't to say that people shouldn't try to make choices that alleviate suffering, that they shouldn't try to make safe choices. The concern comes when a group decides that they need to alleviate the suffering of other people, and they're going to do that with force. They're going to start to remove choices so that suffering goes away. That's where it starts to become a concern. If we can work towards the alleviation of suffering in the choices that we make, in the way that we behave towards one another, then we're actively choosing not to pursue suffering. We're choosing to pursue something hopefully better. And it's something worthwhile because we're making the choice. But if a body like the government comes in and says, you can no longer do these things, and they force you to stop, they take away your ability, the people aren't good people at that point in time anymore. They may appear to, and we can discuss whether you can actually stop all suffering or not, but let's just pretend you could. People would appear to be prospering. But if there's no agency and there's no choice, there's no achievement, how do you feel as a people? You haven't overcome anything. And you can't look at that group of people and say, that's a good people. They're going to make a lot of good choices, because they're not making any choices. Our ability to choose good instead of suffering or pain was taken away. We don't even know how to differentiate between the two. We're just an organ stop at that point. And so there's a large push today in society to stop suffering, stop pain, especially from a government perspective. You had mentioned earlier, I don't know if you mentioned in this or if we were talking, but the stock market just tumbled 1,000 points in a day. There's a lot of market concerns right now. And many people, are asking for the government to step in. Hey, stop. People are going to get hurt. People are going to lose their jobs. But the more that happens, the less ability we have to choose and to learn and to grow as a people and to make good choices. And so that's from the perspective of having agency and the purpose of suffering. We have to understand when we're asking for a body to come in with force and take away any suffering, we're also asking it to take away love, to take away becoming, to take away achievement. And we need to carefully weigh the request that we're making in those cases.
Yeah, I really appreciate you bringing up some of those thoughts. There's another quote to go along with some of that, and I love hearing quotes from Dostoevsky. He's a fascinating mind. But there's another guy named Francis Fukuyama, and he wrote a book called The End of History. And he said, experience suggests that if men cannot struggle on behalf of a just cause, because that just cause was victorious in an earlier generation, then they will struggle against the just cause. They will struggle for the sake of struggle. They will struggle, in other words, out of a certain boredom, for they cannot imagine living in a world without struggle. And I believe that one of the things that this author is talking about is that suffering actually brings purpose to life. It gives us direction. It helps us choose to do something. And I look at a lot of parents, we have this kind of prosperity cycle that we talk about. A lot of parents grow up poor and they had to go without. And they say, I don't want that for my kids. I want to give my kids all the things I didn't have. Until then we go and we raise a generation where we give them all kinds of things and all kinds of riches. But that generation often ends up falling or having another generation that's just now is entitled to expect so many things and kind of loses touch with reality. And we see these things, we see experiences in society where usually right before a recession or even the Great Depression, things boom, things go great for a time, and then it kind of collapses. And the law has sought for a long time to stop recessions from happening. Government looks to do that. And to this point you're making, Michael, if the law is saying we're going to stop harm, oh, don't worry, you lost your job, well, we'll guarantee you income, no worries. Then when the law guarantees you income and it just keeps paying you and paying you and paying you, then you lose incentive, you lose purpose, you lose drive. And these things are related to suffering and love because they're showing that when choice is being removed or when risk is being taken away, that's a reduction in choice. Something's happening and it's fundamentally altering our mind and our heart and our incentive even as a human. And some of these authors talk about, if you give everyone everything, if you give them the riches of the world, they're still going to find something to struggle against because that's how they find purpose in life. And so when we say, why does God allow suffering? Why does it allow struggle? Well, I believe it's because our purpose in this life of coming here is to learn to love. I have to learn to care more about my country than I do about being entertained. I need to go to work for it. I need to sacrifice for it. I need to care more about my wife and kids than I do about my own comfort, my own fun, my own enjoyment. And I need to go work for them and do something for them and contribute to their life and well-being. That's how I gain happiness in life, is by working for and contributing to another person. I need to learn to love my fellow man more than I love myself. I need to learn to work to me personally choose to take an action to reduce suffering in somebody. If I personally make that decision, that person can feel love. They can feel one of the deep connections of human life that someone just chose to do this. And I can feel purpose. And one of the fascinating things about suffering is we don't actually have to be mean to people in order for suffering to exist. Suffering exists in this world. Illness, broken bones, natural disasters, all kinds of things happen. But we, I believe, are being tested on, are we becoming beings of love? A being of love is a being that acts to reduce the suffering of another. We're making that choice. We're saying, you're more valuable than my own comfort, my own security. And what happens when we turn to the law to take these things away, and we say, hey, America, just, make it illegal for someone to get hurt. We want to take away this harm. So make it illegal for people to invest. One thing that America does right now drives me wild. America doesn't let the average American invest in a business. We have securities laws that say only accredited investors are allowed to invest in a private business. We have these public ones, and so we have this select few companies we can invest in. But those public companies aren't the ones that make people super wealthy. And if I had the ability as an average American to put $1,000 into a business that's just starting out, it's not publicly traded yet, that could grow to $1 million. And there are people that do that, but they're already rich. The American law says, we don't want these poorer Americans to be hurt, because if they put up $1,000 and it's all they have, they could lose everything. We need to protect them. And then these laws come and say it's illegal for an American to put $1,000 into a private business. But the rich can, because the rich can, they're not going to hurt as much if they lose $1,000. But what have we just done? When the law came in to take away the opportunity for me to lose my money, it took away the opportunity for me to make millions off of $1,000. It's gone. And so now the law has removed a choice from me because it was trying to prevent harm. And when the law comes in and does these things and works to prevent harm, to Michael's point, the law is actually removing something intrinsically from us. This is one of the balances we talk about with liberty. The state of life is a state of liberty, where life requires that certain laws exist. So for it to have life, I believe very strongly we need gravity. It's got to pull things together. It's got to keep some level of order. And life flourishes in a state of gravity because then there's some level of predictability there. If we're all just floating, our atoms, everything, life doesn't work the same. But gravity gives us some level of order. And so there's certain laws that need to exist to create life, to allow it to function, to give it balance, to do these different things. But then the balance with life is you have law on the one side, but you have agency and choice on the other. Within the laws and the things that exist, I get to choose. And when our human laws come in and say, let's not let you choose something bad, we're going to take that choice away from you. We're taking the success, the fulfillment, the progression that comes with that. If the law comes in and says, Austin, we don't want you to feel sad losing the Olympics. We know how crushing it is for all the athletes that don't win gold. So we're just going to stop that harm. What the law is saying is the fruits or the good or the benefits that come from me undertaking action, doing something, isn't worth the loss they may experience along the way. But I believe God looks at it the other way, where he says, there's something so deep and amazing here. The fruits of love, the benefits of love, the good things that come from love, far outweigh the suffering you may experience along the way. So yeah, suffering's not fun. It's not great. But if we embark on this path and we become subject to suffering, then we get to experience the deep joy, fulfillment, satisfaction of these things. And so going back to the law side, is that there is a very strong societal trend right now to eliminate all harm from society. If someone's defrauded, I see people on both sides of the political spectrum saying, there should be a law against that. There needs to be a law against this, there needs to be a law against that. People will say if you even go to the trans debate with sports, this is another thing in the Olympics right now. Can someone that was born male transition to female, to the extent that that's physically possible? Are they allowed to participate, or are they not? Conservatives will say ban them from girls' sports. Liberals will often say let them participate, they're female. But both want a law to solve the problem. And every law we pass to stop a harm, every law that we undertake to take something away, it's actually removing meaning from our life. And this is something that when we look at our society today, we're incredibly rich. We live in the richest society that's ever been in the history of the world. And we are crazy depressed. Mental health issues all over the place. Anxiety runs rampant. And people point fingers at all kinds of things. Maybe it's the toxins in the environment. Maybe it's ultra processed foods. Maybe it's pharmaceuticals. Maybe it's vaccinations. Maybe it's whatever. We throw out all these different things. And I say, but I actually believe very strongly the laws we pass fundamentally influence the ability for us to feel and experience life. Because the laws we pass start to take away and creep in on this agency, this force comes in, and we're losing the ability to choose. And as we lose the ability to choose, we lose fulfillment. If I no longer have the choice to make a good or bad decision, or a good or bad investment, or to try for the Olympics, I'm losing fulfillment. And right now we're putting all these social safety nets. We want universal income. We want all these different things. And at the end of the day, I believe it will make us so crazy depressed. The more and more we pursue no harm and no risk, the more and more we lose value. And the more and more, the harder and harder it gets to find true love, because people don't have to sacrifice for you. There's no reason for them to sacrifice for you when you have everything. This is even a fascinating thing to look at with home insurance. Virtually every American has home insurance because they have to get a home mortgage. And if you have a fire and your house burns down, insurance just steps in and pays it all. We used to have strong community outpouring and support for people who had deep loss. And I'm even reminded of a scene from Inside Out, the Disney Pixar movie, where Joy, the character in the Inside Out show, she wants to stop the human that she's the character in the mind, the emotion in the mind. She wants to make sure that a human only feels joy, never feels sadness, and she tries to keep sadness from touching any of the thoughts or memories. And she eventually learns that the joy, her emotion, only has meaning following a sad moment. That if she gets rid of sadness, there's no joy either. The two go hand in hand. And these are things that, as we look at our laws and we say there should be a law against that, but why should there be a law against that? Why should we seek to live in a state where no harm can exist? Because that's not how God made us. That's not how nature made us, whether you believe in God or nature. But we were given a state to live in and exist in where we could experience deep satisfaction and joy if we follow the principles of working to overcome the opposition, of working to make choices to choose. And as we seek to eliminate all those things through law, I believe very strongly we're contributing to a serious mental health decline, emotional health decline, and will only get worse the more laws we pass to reduce harm, because we cannot stop all harm. And this isn't to say there's a proper balance for some laws to have consequences for certain things that happen. For example, if you murder someone, the law should appropriately impose consequences for that. But I'm talking about laws specifically that seek to make it so someone can't murder someone. Those are the laws that are starting to remove choice. When laws work to make things physically impossible, choices are being removed. And to give an example of how that happens, look at the automobile industry. The price of cars is outrageous, but it doesn't cost very much to build something on wheels with doors and an engine that runs. You can get those pretty cheap. The problem becomes we invent things like anti-lock brakes. They're really cool. They help keep people safe. I love them. But we insist on those in the car. And then airbags. Oh, and not just a driver airbag, but side door airbags, all kinds of airbags all over the place. We insist on frames that collapse in accidents, keep people safer. And I'm not saying that any of those aren't a benefit or something that people could choose. But what the laws have done is the laws then say, oh, if you want to make a vehicle, it has to have all these safety features in it now. I can no longer buy a vehicle. I just don't have the option to go down to, even if let's say I was a business owner and I said, I want to make cars that are affordable. I can make them for $5,000, brand new car, but it won't have anti-lock brakes and it won't have airbags. The law's not going to let me make those and sell those. And so then people are deprived of a choice at that point. And the choices become much smaller and smaller to where we have to participate in all the safety features. The law says you have to wear a seatbelt, even. And I look at that and I go, sure, is it a bad idea to not wear one? In most situations, yes. But when we lose the ability to make those choices for ourselves, we lose the satisfaction of living. And we start to, the laws we pass, the things that we seek to control by force, will take meaning from our life. And the reason that liberty is so amazing and the founding fathers were willing to fight and die for liberty was because they realized there's no meaning to life in a state that's controlled, in a state of force. You're just, to Dostoevsky's point, you're a organ stop just to be pulled or pushed by somebody else. You're told what to do. And we can't seek to eliminate harm without killing the spirit inside us and our ability to truly experience life. Now, again, we can seek to alleviate harm. We can seek to help other people. We can seek to reduce it in our own life, but even then, we're making decisions. If I choose to save and buy a car that has anti-lock brakes and airbags, I've made a decision that I can have satisfaction in. But these are pieces that our law more and more is seeking to take those choices away. And we're seeking to remove the ability for people to cause harm. And that removes life itself. I believe very fundamentally that it removes life itself. Michael, curious if you have thoughts on that, follow-up points, or anything else you want to discuss?
I liked how you mentioned as we lose the ability to make choices, we're told what to do. We lose the ability to show somebody we love them, and another person loses the ability to then feel loved. And so not only are we losing our own growth and becoming, but people that need to feel love, they're losing the chances to feel loved. And I think you can see that in society. I like to say that as people tend to live closer and closer together, we know each other less and less. And you look at something like an apartment complex or townhomes or something, it's a structure that's put in place by somebody else. There's lots of rules and regulations. Things are mostly maintained by outside forces, and people just dwell there and they're free to kind of do their own thing. And you don't know anybody around you. There's not a lot of community involvement. You don't get together and do things. I see that in neighborhoods with strict HOAs. If there's any time something goes on, everybody asks the HOA to take care of it. People don't want to get together to work on something because, well, the HOA is here. The HOA should take care of it. And you lose all of those opportunities to reach out to those around you and express compassion, love, care. And it's so often that I see people complain that their communities aren't close. You don't know people in your community, and it's a frustration to them. But we don't do anything to change it. We continue to say, yeah, but I don't want to do anything. I want an HOA. I want a government entity. I want a city. I want something to take care of my whole environment for me. I don't want to have to do much work. I want to be able to go home and watch my movies and participate in my hobbies. But then we lose that ability to express love, and people lose the ability to then feel that love. And to your point of mental health and anxiety, a big part of our lives as humans is to feel loved, to feel appreciated, to feel recognized. And we continue to remove those opportunities as we seek out convenience, comfort, safety, and we need to consider those risks and say, it's going to be a good thing if we have an opportunity to help somebody out, if we ask somebody for help and they can help us out. It allows us to learn to care for each other and express love and to feel love and to get meaning back into our lives. And so not only do we lose out in our own becoming, but we're unable to help other people, and they lose out. They don't feel loved. You don't feel loved, and we grow apart as a society instead of closer together.
Yeah, and I think one final point to throw out too that I want to stress in this fundamental question of, does God exist with suffering? Jesus Christ, we believe, was God, and he came to this earth. He came to the same condition we were in, and he experienced suffering. And we specifically believe that he descended below all things, meaning he suffered more than any of us could physically suffer. Because he had a body that had some godlike qualities to it, the level of suffering he could endure, or not endure, but experience, the level of suffering he could experience without dying was far higher than what we could experience without dying. And so we believe that he came, descended below all this, suffered more than any one of us could suffer. And this begs this fundamental question of suffering and God. If suffering is not necessary, then why did God suffer? And again, people go back to, well, God's all powerful. He can just make a world without suffering. And I actually believe God can make a world without suffering. But that world will be one without love, because the two go hand in hand. And so it's fascinating that because of God's love for us, again, these two things go together, he came and suffered. And we believe that Jesus Christ fulfilled what we call the atonement and the resurrection. He helped overcome sin, pain, suffering. And with the atonement, we believe that Christ suffered all things, that he understands our suffering, and he has the power to help heal it from a place of understanding. But to show us that love, to say to me, Austin, I really love you. He came and died for me. Greater love hath no man than this, than he that layeth down his life for his friends. And he said, you are more valuable than even my own life. I'm going to lay it down to allow you to have a chance, to allow you to have something come of it. And this is the fundamental, one of the fundamental foundational pieces, I believe, of Christianity, of even life on this earth, is that suffering exists. Yes, we've all witnessed that. I don't know of anyone that doesn't believe suffering exists. But to me, that's evidence God exists, and evidence love exists. And to the point of the quote Michael read at first, it's what makes it so that suffering seems unjust itself, is that we know there's something else. We know there's love. We know there's something that can be better, and we pursue it. But that comes through agency. It comes through our choices and decisions. And that's the fundamental crux of the war in heaven, is Satan saying, I don't like this existence with agency because suffering can exist. But those of us looking at it say, but yes, but that makes it so that something good can exist as well. That makes it so love can exist. And we were willing to undertake the risk, the pain, the sorrow, the heartache, because we wanted the existence that could be when we made the decisions we should, when we exercised our agency. And that world's coming. There are good people all around us that do amazing things to sacrifice. We get to experience this to some level or degree, but it will grow and continue to grow until there's a time when we can live, if we choose to be one of these people that exercise our agency appropriately, we can live with others that do as well. And that life is amazing. and it's something we're seeking and pursuing. So if you find yourself having doubts or concerns about God and suffering, just remember, how can love exist if people don't choose? That's what makes it fulfilling. That's what makes it amazing. And we're here pursuing that because of how deep and amazing that is. Michael, do you have any final thoughts before we wrap up for the day?
No, I think you summed that up pretty well. Pursuit of suffering allows us to pursue love, which I think gives us life meaning.
Awesome. And again, just a reminder, we'll say God does love you and he has a plan for you. And so if your life is dark or feeling depressed, or if you're feeling despair or discouraged because of the laws or any other situation that may exist, there's still hope. There are things we can do. And it's one of the main things about this war in heaven is if we understand what's at issue and what we're battling, there can be purpose in the pursuit and the triumph in overcoming some of these obstacles and other things that exist. So we hope you'll join us next week as we go through more of these principles with the war in heaven. And we appreciate your time with us today.